for the project in the first place, questioning what the government's justification for this project was. I mean, they said the goal of the operation was to track and trace these guns into Mexico to find out where they were going, to try and take down the head of a cartel. But the fact is, out of 2,500 firearms that they trafficked into Mexico, only one of them had a GPS recording device on it. So when the government is saying one thing about why they initiated a program, but the evidence shows that they clearly weren't focused on tracking and tracing, it's important to ask those questions. And the unfortunate part was that it seemed like the media during the time that this was really in the news was more focused on whether Darrell Issa was overstepping his authority as the chairman of the Oversight Committee by asking these questions, by asking the Justice Department to provide documentation about who was in charge of this, who gave the green light. And of course, just, and I know what I'm just going to talk about the IRS scandal, but when this first came out, the administration said that it was a low-level rogue operation that happened in Phoenix. We've heard that with the IRS scandal, right? It's a couple low-level IRS agents in Cincinnati that carried this out. Well, it turns out that, the very highest officials in the Department of Justice were getting emails about this. Landy Brewer, who is Eric Holder's right-hand man, knew all about this, was sending emails back and forth about it. And Eric Holder changed his testimony multiple times under oath about when he knew and when he knew it. And then there, of course, there's the fact that he said he knew nothing about it until it came out in the press. And yet there are multiple memos addressed directly to him talking about the operation, not to mention President Obama specifically made a point to send him to Mexico to stop this iron flow of weapons from the United States into Mexico. And so the issue really just raised a lot of questions that I feel like the press should be answering, but they're not. And so luckily, because of bloggers and new media, we were able to get a lot of those questions answered and to continue to push it as an issue of transparency, government accountability, and exposing corruption, which is the job, I think, of media. So that's the short version, and I'll answer your questions after we're done. But that was basically why I decided to make that as an issue.
Thanks, Katie. And the long of uninsured Americans have not signed up for Obamacare, which is just a catastrophe for them. But one thing that I think has characterized the media coverage of all of this has been this entertaining sense of surprise. They're all just shocked. How is this going so badly? Well, someone who wasn't shocked is Mary Catherine Ham, because she was sounding the clarion call that they were not ready. They were not going to be close to ready to get this thing right. Way a little bit in the process.
We use the bad for our entertainment. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. We can't have jobs and do what we do, which is really fun, and we hope good for the country and for everyone without you guys. I'm glad to be sitting in the little rhino chair. I feel very comfortable with this position. And listening to Katie go through that, and I know you guys will have this feeling as well. You get the feeling sometimes you're like, this is a real thing, right? This is a scandal. Why is everyone acting like it's not? A border agent was killed. We are selling guns from our government to Mexico. Am I taking crazy pills? Yeah. Especially when you, as a conservative, look at how other things are covered for other people. You go, really? We're not watching this? So we commiserate with you guys. And the reason we're talking about, a guide to covering quote-unquote phony scandals is because not only we can do it, not only the mainstream media can do it, all of you guys can do it as well. And that's the power of what we're offered these days. And I always joke that the people in this room, and at any activist conference, frankly, we're not normal people. Like, in this sense, we're like really, really big Days of Our Lives fans who are constantly trying to convince everyone else who doesn't watch Days of Our Lives that something really cool and interesting is happening every single day that's vitally important that they pay attention to. And they're like, I don't know, I feel like I can just tune in every 4 years, and Marlena and like Stefano are doing the same same stuff, right? And we're like, no, you have to have an impact now. So that's the situation that we're in. That's who we're trying to communicate to, and that's the problem for any political being. And so and I think the rest of us try to take that to heart when we're trying to communicate about this stuff to folks. And the beauty of being the weirdos who pay attention to this stuff every day is that you can take that to other people, and that's a little bit about what we've done on all these various issues. On Obamacare, and as Guy said, there has been lots of coverage of this post-meltdown, and I wish there had been more skeptical coverage before the meltdown. And I think even liberal activists and people who are pro-Obamacare who were writing about it pre-launch, had they been more skeptical, had the White House not been so sort of blinders on about what they could accomplish technologically, they perhaps could have fixed some of these problems before it happened, and had they not been sort of politically insulating themselves and to the detriment of the process of building this website. I'm going to pat myself on the back for just 1 second, but embedded in this is also a critique of myself, so just give me 1 second. But I am going to read, just as an illustration of how conservatives were watching this issue and understanding it earlier than even health reporters who are supposed to do it every single day. This is perhaps the most prescient thing I've ever written. I said, the Federal Data Hub, which is what they were building for all the Obamacare websites to plug into, it's meant to call an incredible, this is November of 2012 that I wrote this, so almost a year later it launched. It's meant to call an incredible amount of data and pair it with an incredibly complex set of eligibility requirements. I think even that's an open question, but here's the bottom line. This is a giant tech undertaking which will need to serve many localities with different needs, link existing technologies and personnel with a new, giant federal hub, and somehow make sure all of them work together to smoothly guide consumers who have no idea what to expect in subsidies or services through a brand new web portal for health insurance. They have less than a year to accomplish this. It seems there has been no pilot program, no training, and no beta testing. This thing is Orca on steroids. Which, as we'll remember, was the end of the last. And so, the reason that I had sort of noticed this is thinking from somebody who's not a technologist but who had been involved in those kind of things before, this seems like a really big project, and the government is not usually great at doing this stuff. I decided to start visiting the Maryland Health Board Exchange meetings, which are scintillating. But as many of you guys know, when you're the Days of Our Lives fan, it's your job to go to the scintillating meetings, and that's the job of reporters and the mainstream media as well. And like I said, we can all do it. And so I started going to these Maryland meetings, thinking to myself, I want to be fair about this. I know I'm against this law. I'm very skeptical, so I'm going to go to Maryland, which is a small state, which is very experienced in executing health bureaucracy because they've been doing it for years. All blue, you know, both feet in on Obamacare from the very beginning, wanting to get this right. Because I don't want to be a hack and be like, oh, this is falling apart, and it turns out that's not the case. So I'm going to Maryland, where they're bound to get this sort of right. So I go to Maryland, I go to the meetings, and everything sort of sounds nice, but then I start asking questions like, is the Federal Data Hub ready? Do you guys know how you're going to plug into it? When are you going to plan to train navigators? How long will that take? And the timeline started looking very grim when I was sitting in these rooms in the sort of end of 2012, beginning of 2013. And after each meeting, when I would ask these questions, a few technologists who worked in the private sector, maybe weren't on the project per se, would come up to me and go, yes, we have no idea. How are we going to do this? And the tech guys who were working on the projects were sitting in the audience like, and now Maryland's Health Exchange has sort of never come to fruition. They spent more than $100 million on it. The sort of head of the exchange, who took a vacation to the Cayman Islands a week after it imploded, has left the building. Luckily, she's not on paid leave. I think she is actually done. But these are things that I think, especially with Obamacare, conservatives were well positioned to look at the situation and be skeptical in a way that liberals weren't. Because they had confidence that this engine of government was going to be able to do this, even if they were technologists who should have known better. And my criticism for myself is that I should have done this more consistently. Because those meetings were so scintillating, because I felt like, is anyone really interested in exchange implementation? But I was really, my gut told me, I think something's going very wrong here. And I wish I had done more on that issue, just stayed on it. And that's an encouragement to all of us, especially in your states when you go to these scintillating meetings. You can have such an impact by reporting from those places, doing the Days of Our Lives fangirl thing, fanboy thing, and making it accessible to other people. And when your gut tells you something is going on, to continue to hunt that down. And I think that's something that conservatives in general maybe don't do enough of, that original reporting, myself included, and it really can be powerful. And it could have been powerful, I mean, I think it was powerful to have these insights before it happened. It could have been more powerful if there had been more of us being more